Hello, you're very welcome along to the Matchbook Cheltenham Trail. Once again, we are here. Your host is Daniel Hussey, joined, as always, by Matt Toombs and Donn McClean. Don, pretty decent weekends racing again. I mean, we keep saying about me personally, I love that the drums are back.
Yeah, I know. Like we said it time and time again. These weekends, and I think last weekend was Matt's favourite. Hatton's Grace Hurdle weekend, but all of them, and especially since they put the Navan days and the Punchestown 2 days together on this side of the RSC, and the Hillyway Chase has always been on the same weekend as the Tingle Creek Chase and all that went with Sandown and Navan here and Cork yesterday. Now, top stuff.
Yeah, Matt, they're calling it the Willie Way Chase now for down in Cork. So I don't know if you heard that one.
Yeah, well, they might as well, given his record in it. It's incredible, and it's, as we'll come on to, he tends to run his best chaser in that rather than in the Tingle Creek.
Yeah, apologies to Hugh Cal on RT because he did give me that. I heard him on the coverage over the weekend, but I just couldn't live with the guilt there for those 10-15 seconds when Matt was talking. But before we get going, if you are watching the YouTube video, do hit that like button and leave a comment or a question for Matt and Don. We will get to it at the end of the show. But other than that, we're going to get straight into our weekend review. We're going to do eye catchers, 3 each from the guys. Rest of the weekend races if we have time, and then when to pull the trigger from Matt as well, and concluding a question at the end too, again if we have time. But we'll start with the Tingle Creek and John Bon. Matt, bring your trend in, but I thought John Bon overall was quite impressive considering that ground and considering at times maybe looked a tad in trouble. That I was pretty impressed with him by the finish.
Yeah, I agree with that. For a long time, this was the mid-season championship race in the division. Tended to be a rarity in bringing the best British and Irish horses together at this stage of the season. Having produced 16 festival winners this century, 13 of them in the champion chase, Tingle Creek has the second best race all season in terms of the overall number of festival winners it's produced. But having produced 11 of the first 15 champion chase winners this century, only produced 2 of the last 8, none of the last 3. And the growing influence of Willie Mullins in the division is part of that. He tends, as I've said, to send his best 2-milers to the Hilly Way. Wouldn't overstate this. Tingle Creek's still going to be a key guide, but it used to be a race that was not dissimilar to the champion chase, most famously with the Moscow Fly Reserve at World Chief clashes. Doesn't quite do that at the moment. El Fabiola went to Cork instead. And that left John Bon with a pretty simple looking task. Despite the ground being against him, thought he completed it with a minimum of fuss. Nico sensibly looking to avoid giving him a harder race than necessary. We didn't learn that much more about him, other than he's continuing to mature. He's been an edgy type. Maybe more maturity will help eke out the improvement he needs to close the gap on El Fabiolo. Nicky's favouring the Game Spirit as his prep. That looks a good call rather than the Clarence House, although the latter might have served up a mouth-watering clash with El Fabiolo. Horses don't finish tired over 2 miles the way they do over 3, but the ground's often deep at Ascot. 3 races against good opposition all in bad ground may not be the ideal prep for the champion chase. Hopefully there's some decent ground, the Game Spirit, so he gets used to jumping at pace again. It's hard to assess how his jumping is progressing in his second season over fences on deep ground. Could be we get to the big rematch in the champion chase and we'll still be guessing a fair bit about how the 2 of them are likely to jump. We'll come on and talk about the Hilly Way, but the Ante-Post prices with John Bon at 3.75, El Fabiola at 2.0 look about right. Edwardstone confirmed the impression in the Schloer that he's bounced back from whatever was ailing him in the champion chase. Alan King's mooting, trying him over an intermediate trip in something like the Ascot chase. That's surely got to be worth trying. He's one to keep in mind for the Ryanair. And Haddock's Oboe looked a classic Gary Moore 2-mile chaser, progressing through handicaps into a graded conditions racehorse. Only beaten 4 3/4 lengths. Be interested to see what the handicapper does tomorrow. He's only 6 on an upward curve, but I wouldn't be taking his proximity to the winner literally. And I think John Bon was pretty good in the ground.
Yeah, thought for the briefest of moment when they're turning in, that could have potentially been the winner. But Don, yeah, your thoughts on John Bon's performance there on Saturday?
Yeah, look, I echo a lot of what Matt said. I thought Haddock's des Oboe ran a big race. Now, Gary Moore does target this meeting. He likes to have winners at Sandown and Ascot in particular. And it wouldn't be surprising if Haddock's des Oboe has had this race in mind for a little while, or at least this meeting. So, no, but he ran a big race. He's only 6. He's only run 6 times over fences. So I can see him continuing on the upward curve. On John Bon, yeah, like you had to be happy with him, I thought. Like he got in tight to the pond fence. It's only 3 out, and Nicola Bonville had to kind of ride him along a little bit after that. But you never really thought that he wasn't going to get there, and it was a good performance. kind of what we would have expected from, like, I know he was fairly long odds on. So it was a good performance from John Bond. And after his Slur Chase win, he's now got a Single Creek Chase win as well. So it's a good start to the season for him. And yeah, I'd say if Nicky was kind of between the Clarence House and the Game Spirit after the Hillyway Chase, when Willie said, I might just go to the Clarence House, I'm sure that swayed him. But it also makes sense to give him his break now after 2 runs. You have a longer break to the Game Spirit. We know that it's a good prep, a good stepping stone to the Champion Chase. So that all makes sense. And yeah, it was good to see Edwardson back as well and running well again. So, and I fully agree that a step up in trip now. I think they were thinking about the King George at one point, but step up to 2.5 would be the right way to go. Nube Negra, the ground was just too soft for him. So look, we won't see him until he gets back on better ground. He's 9 rising 10 though, so just wonder where he's going to go next. But no, like for John Bond, bookmakers kind of left him unchanged for the Champion Chase, maybe nicked him in a tiny bit, but I'd say that was about right. Like he's good and well, and probably did what you expected him to do, but did it well, I think, in the end.
Yeah, I thought it was a pretty decent race, and JP's interview on ITV Racing thought it was very heartwarming. He was there with his 7 grandchildren, but he also was hoping El Fabiola would do the business in the Hillyway because they would have that clash in March. So well worth digging in. I tweeted out that interview earlier. But yeah, decent race to Tingle Creek, and John Bond hopes that he could potentially overturn that with El Fabiola. We'll get to that later on, but we'll go to the fighting 5th here. And yeah, Matt, bring your trend and I'll go to Donn. But this was, look, you called it right in the Matchbook Betting podcast on Friday morning. You said Constitution Hill was highly unlikely to run, and unfortunately that proved the case.
Absolutely. The forecast was about, I don't think he'd have run on Friday. I think Nicky was quite sensibly waiting because it seemed like it was 50-50 whether the Saturday card would go ahead. So he wouldn't have been able to the one make the call had it been called off. The trend is that runners are 5 from 48 in the Champion Hurdle this entry. Very small loss back blind. But in the last 13 years, only 2 winners, both odds on the day. So it's not been a particularly strong recent guide to the Champion Hurdle. Yeah,
and obviously without the superstar, Donn, we were left with an ultimately disappointing field. But it was a dramatic race. And look, a brilliant winner and Not So Sleepy's 10th season running, which I thought was absolutely incredible.
Yeah, he won this 2 years, or he dead heated for this race 2 years ago with Epatante as a 9-year-old. And you thought, oh, that's an old winner of the fighting 5th. And then he goes and wins at 11. Yeah, I don't know if it has any bearing, Matt, on trends, given that it's at Sandown this year and not at Newcastle. But yeah, look, it was a pity Constitution Hill didn't run. That was expected. It's a pity Shishkin didn't run. I'm not sure that was fully expected. I'm not sure why he didn't run. Would have been nice to see him in there and at least, get him out and get him started and see where he goes. But 4-horse race. And the front 3, they're all forward going horses, aren't they? Not So Sleepy, You Were Well and Goshen. They're all forward going. Navan, there was a chance she was going to have the run of the race sitting in behind, but she just couldn't keep up at points. She was probably going a wee bit faster than she wanted to go, or than she could go for Jonathan Burke without him having to burst her. But then you thought she might stay on, and she did stay on, but she was never getting the Not So Sleepy. It was a really good performance by the winner, and it's back to what we were saying last week about Dashel Drasher and Paisley Park fighting at the finish of the long distance hurdle. It's great that these horses come back and bounce. Hughie Morrison has done some job with him. Like he ran well in the Cesarovich a couple of years ago. So yeah, it was a big performance from Not So Sleepy. That's his big win on the board. But in terms of implications for the festival, the Cheltenham Festival, yeah, I'm not sure there are too many.
Yeah, Matt, it was disappointing that Shishkin didn't run. It could have probably won this race, just seeing how it panned out in the end. But I think Nicky also took Will Mount out. So I think 3 horses were taken out that morning.
Yeah, as you say, you'd think you had a great chance the way it worked out. Sometimes things just fall your way. That's what happened here. Not So Sleepy. This was his 65th race in his 10th season. One stat I don't have is whether that's the highest number of races a horse has had when winning a Grade 1. But I guess he'd be near, if not the top of that leaderboard. His record on heavy ground and jumps is now 1-1-1. The other 2 wins are in Grade 3 handicaps. Stays 2.25 miles in the flat, as Don was saying, and placed 3 times in the Cesarovich. So with the benefit of hindsight with what turned up, he had his perfect conditions and he was on a going day. It won't have had any impact on the Champion Hurdle, but may do on the Mares Hurdle. The 2 mares, Love Envoy and You Wear It Well, leading contenders for that, both look to be hating the ground here from a relatively early stage. Slog on bad ground wasn't an ideal race for either, especially Love Envoy on her seasonal debut. So it won't be a positive for their festival chances. Whether it's done them any harm, we probably find out after their next run. But as Don said, huge credit to Hughie Morrison, for getting one of the Grade 1 training performances of recent seasons. Tricky horse, rising 12 to win that. Hats off to him.
Okay, yeah, fascinating. Look, a really enjoyable race and a really enjoyable winner, and again, some great interviews I thought on ITV Racing. Matt, we'll stick with you for the trend here and give us your thoughts on Henry VIII, which is really the headline. If you were on Matchbook social channels on Saturday, was Tom Stanley tipping up not just a winner, not just a 21.0 winner, but a best bet winner. So I think it's only fair we give him enough stick on all the podcasts and all the platforms throughout the Matchbook betting content that we give him a small bit of credit, Matt, particularly yourself, obviously.
Absolutely excellent call. And it was one of those races. Normally when I back a loser, phlegmatically say, I've taken a view on the horse's price based on the chance I give it. But the vast majority of bets I'm having about horses I think should be odds against. So look at it individually. You're not expecting them to win. But occasionally you kick yourself afterwards. And that was very much the case here. It was a weak Grade 1. And as Tom said, there was a Gary Moore horse in the race who'd shown little over hurdles, but won 2 handicap chases in good style, stepping into Grade 1 company, a classic Gary Moore MO, and at Sandown to boot. So a great call there by Tom. Looking at the trends, since this became a Grade 1 in 2011, runners are 2 from 16, a 70% loss in the Arkle, winners 2 from 7, 32% loss. Prior to that, there have been another 26 renewals that could have produced an Arkle winner, only 2 did. So given it's the only Grade 1 novice chase at around the minimum trip in Britain before the festival, not been quite as strong a trial as you might imagine. And crucially, this did look a weak renewal. Le Patron very much the one to take out of it. He'd been running in Class 3 or lower contests previously, only 5. So it's forgivable. He was a bit green at the business end, had a good look at the last, idling on the run-in. So I think he's value for a good bit further than the 1 1/4 lengths that he won by. Gary said he doesn't have the pace of Ahmad, his previous winner of the race. He'll step up in trip now. Again, the Scilly Isles, the target. So whilst this looked a weak Grade 1, Gary said he wants soft ground. Even so, 41.0 for the Turners looks a bit of an insult for all I'm not rushing out to back him. And it did look a Grade 1 that won't have much relevance for the festival.
Yeah, Don, on that podcast, we were talking about a weak Grade 1 potentially before the race, and I think that ultimately probably proved. But what I wanted to know your thoughts, Don, particularly on the second and the third, and maybe prospects down the line. I think JPR 1 was disappointing overall, but Conall Harry probably didn't lose too much in the field, albeit disappointing to lose to the Gary Moore horse.
Yeah, like I thought JPR 1 was probably underpriced in the beginning. It looked easy in hindsight to finish third, but like he was traveling, he was going to win the last day at Cheltenham, but that was probably a weak Grade 2, and horses who do that are normally overbet next time. And I think he was weak in the market though just before the race, so he drifted out. He wasn't sent off favourite in the end. Colonel Harry was sent off favourite. I think Colonel Harry may have been a wee bit flattered in getting as close to Le Patron as he did. I thought Le Patron was idling on the run in, so Colonel Harry, yeah, and like I think we're back to the fact that it, as a Grade 1 race, it wasn't a strong renewal of it. Like you go back through past winners of this race. Edwardson won it 2 years ago, and Edwardson was even then he was rated 149. Last year, John Bond beat Boot Hill. John Bond was already rated 152 over fences. Boot Hill was in the high 140s. This year, like the winners at rate 133. The highest rated horse in it was Unexpected Party, who was fairly well exposed on 146. So it just, like all the indications are, it wasn't a very strong renewal. That said, like hats off to A, Tom Stanley, and B, Gary Moore. Like you always have to look at Gary Moore's horses. It seems like Ascot and Sandown, they seem to be the tracks at which he aims his horses. And there are some races as well dotted around through the calendar, including the Betfair Hurdle, where you have to have a look at his horses as well. So, look, fair play to him. It was a great day for him, double on the day. It could have been a treble. But yeah, I like Le Patron. Interesting, as Matt was saying there, stepping up in trip. He could improve. Like he's likely race. He's only had his 3 runs over fences. He's won all 3. So, like, he's going to have to improve to be continuing his Grade 1 march. But you can see him improving all right.
Yeah, be interesting. You could definitely see that price coming in a little bit. Maybe not ultimately a festival contender like you touched on, Matt, but maybe that price might come in a tad, and maybe slightly disrespectful having at such a big price at the moment for the Turners. We will move on, Don, I want to get your thoughts on the Navan Novice Hurdle here on Saturday. But Matt, just bring the trend in first and let Don pick it up then.
Trend is that 12 runners in the Ballymore have produced 2 winners and 6 places, whereas all 18 runners in the Albert Bartlett have been beaten. Although this lost Grade 1 status in 2014 usually attracts a classy field rather than simply embryonic stayers contest a lot of the intermediate trip graded races at this stage. Last year's one way in the pocket, dropped back to the minimum trip, 4th in the Supreme, won the top novices. And we've covered this before, that speed is the underestimated fact in the Ballymore. It's the 2 mile Grade 1 form that gets under bet. Grade 1 winners overall at 2.5 miles or further are 3 from 26, 71% lost in the last 26 renewals. But the 3 winners ran in either this, when it was a Grade 1, or the Grade 1 version of the Slaney at Naas in early January. So these are the 2 intermediate trip novice hurdles where the classy novices tend to get sent. So if you're looking to buck the speed trends in the Ballymore, this is a good race to look for clues.
Okay, yeah, Dom, pick that up. So Henry would tend to target this Navan meeting in general, wouldn't he, for his good horses. So overall, then, what should make a Slade Steele's performance in winning by half a length ultimately against Lecky Watson?
Yeah, no, I thought he was very good, Dan. Like, this is a race that it has produced horses who've stepped out and trip on occasions. Matt was saying, No More Heroes won it, Bells Hill won it, Death Duty won it, Next Destination won it, Latest Exhibition. Like, they're all staying types horses. By contrast, last year in the pocket won it when it was actually moved to Naas. We had the Navan novice hurdle at Naas, and they took out some of the hurdles, so it was unsatisfactory as a jumping test. But in the pocket, did well to win it, and after that, he did really well to step back and trip. He ran the Supreme. I think the ground maybe dictated where he went in at Cheltenham. He had the Ballymore and the Supreme as options from up until the 11th hour, and then he stepped back and trip and won the top novices hurdle at Aintree over 2 miles. So and then he's had his run over fences this season. I think he still has 2.5 miles as options, but he's Henry de Bromheads as well, obviously. But Slade Steele, yeah, look, I thought he did well because he won his maiden hurdle at Naas. He beat King of Kingsfield in that, and King of Kingsfield obviously enhanced that form when he ran such a big race in the Royal Bond hurdle, finishing second in that. I think King of Kingsfield probably performed better in the Royal Bond because maybe because he was held up, as opposed to at Naas he made the running. But that said, Slade Steele beat him well, and he beat him for stamina because he was under a ride from a fairway out at Naas the last time, Slade Steele, and he kept on really well. He was very strong at the finish up the hill at Naas. So going up to 2.5 miles, there was every chance that he would improve for it, and he did. And there was a point just on the run in when at the second last he kind of dropped in behind horses, and it looked like it looked from the camera angle that he was closer to the pace than he was when he jumped the second last, and he was kind of came in behind Rachel Blackmore, took him out, and at that point Lecky Watson was coming up on his outside, so he did well to be strong to retain his position, and then he was very fast and low at the last, which gained him ground. Even so, it still looked like Lecky Watson was going to get him, but he battled on really well, and they both came away from Stellar Story, a really good horse of Gordon Elliott's, and Better Days Ahead. So I thought it was a really good performance from Stellar Story, and I can see maybe Lecky Watson stepping out in trip. Like, he ran in the bumper last season. He ran really well in the Cheltenham bumper, and he won his maiden hurdle over 2 miles and 7 at Thurles in the early part of the season. Now, Willie Mullins sometimes doesn't care too much about distances. He just runs his horses at the time that the race comes up when the conditions suit. But I can see Lecky Watson maybe staying further, maybe being an Albert Bartlett horse, whereas Slade Steele, I think he's pacier than that. He's 2.5 miles. It was interesting that Henry was saying afterwards that maybe the Nathaniel Lacey hurdle at the Dublin Racing Festival over 2 miles 6 would not be the race for him, that he sees him more as a pacey horse. And I think like he's a Grade 2 winner now. He's a really likeable horse. And remember, he was in the mix for the Royal Bond hurdle with Antubber, his stable companion, also owned by Rob Kerr, by Brian Atchison, and they decided to go with Antubber for that. But he's always been highly regarded, Slade Steele, and yeah, this is a good performance, good, and that's a performance from which he should be able to build as well and improve again.
Okay, Matt, would you be in agreement with Don's thoughts there?
Yeah, positive about the form of this race. Like the winner, considering they didn't get racing till quite late on, thought he was an authoritative winner. Interesting about Antubber, it wouldn't surprise me if Antubber ended up at Cheltenham owing the Albert Bartlett, while Slade Steele ends up in the Ballymore, but we're a long way from that. Lecky Watson, said, is interesting. Didn't win a bumper, but was at 4th in the champion bumper, going off 81.0. Still looks pretty backward to me. Certainly plenty to learn about jumping, a little bit about settling. So he couldn't be battle hardened enough for something like the Albert Bartlett at this stage, but sometimes the penny drops suddenly with these novices. He looks to have a real engine, so he's one to keep an eye on as the season develops. If he starts looking professional in the run-up to the festival, he's the sort who might go well at a huge price in the very unpredictable Albert Bartlett. He's only 26.0 at the moment, but that race tends to be very defensively priced, Ante-Post. Now's not the time to be getting involved, but he's one for the notebook.
Okay, Matt, as always, knowing when to pull the trigger with some races and not others. We'll move to Sunday in Cork and the Hilly/Willie Way Chase. And we don't have a trend here, Don, so just take it away on what you thought of El Fabiolo. Given all that weight away, I guess, not too dissimilar to John Bon in terms of decent considering the ground and the way for El Fabiolo. But yeah, what were your initial thoughts?
Yeah, I'd agree with exactly that, Daniel. I thought he, like, similar to John Bon, actually. You expected him to win and win well. He did win well, while not being maybe flashy or blowing you away. He did what he needed to do. You never thought he wasn't going to do what he needed to do. He really tanked through the early part of the race, and that was probably down to freshness. I thought his jumping was good. He made one mistake down the back, and I'm sure if you had some of the fives on, your heart was in your mouth at the last, so you just gave that little nod.
The second fence on was a bit messy.
Second fence, yeah. But it was never, and you know, kind of course, I was involved in the race, but when he did nod, I did kind of give a little flutter as well, just for a sec. But watching it back, there was never any question of him coming down or anything like that. No, look, Paul Tannen just kept it simple, kept him going forward, and he went for a jump at the second last, and he really pinged that. And you know, as I was saying yesterday, he could improve again this season. Like his jumping is not flawless. And for me, with the novice, that's often a positive, because it means that there's room for improvement in the jumping. And when they improve their jumping, I suppose if they improve their jumping, that can bring them forward quite a bit. And the other thing is that, you know, the really top 2 mile chasers, they were always a bit chancy at their jumps. You often had your heart in your mouth. And that's part of the speed, isn't it? Like, you have to take, if you're safe at every fence and you're definitely not going to fall, you're probably giving away pace and speed and sharpness over your fences. Like Moscow Flyer, you know, remember he had that record where I think it was 2 wins and a fall, 2 wins and an unseat, 2 wins and a fall, but that was him. And when he got it right, he was brilliant. And El Fabiolo likewise. And I thought his round of jumping yesterday as an entity was as good a round of jumping as a complete round of jumping as he's put up. And look, as you say, Dan, he was given lots of weight away to Fieldor. He's a good horse. He's rated 150. He was given a stone and 3 pounds to Mascada, who's rated 151. So it was a good performance. And again, bookmakers either left him as he was or nicked him in, and that was kind of right, I'd say. But no, I think it was a positive for El Fabiolo, and something that you would have wanted to have seen if you're on him for the champion chase.
Yeah, I'm one of those 2 losers. Stay tuned for our eye catcher section. Matt Toombs, I've sort of looked at those prices, similar to yourself, 375, 191, thinking I'd nearly made the case for John Bon. Then Don touched on the age for El Fabiolo. El Fabiolo is only 6, John Bon's 7. John Bon's raced 4 or 5 times more than El Fabiolo in the UK and Ireland. So suddenly those things are almost stacking in El Fabiola's favour for more improvement this year.
Yeah, and Don made the important point that if you are a little bit novice in your first season, there's much more scope for improvement than if you're an absolutely magic jumper, like a sort of brave man's game was from the word go. El Fabio is quite a low aggressive jumper. And it's not so much that he makes big mistakes. He's just a little bit awkward a couple of times around. He never really looks like falling. Obviously, the easier fences these days give him more margin for error at Cheltenham. So, yeah, and if an improved John Bon turns up on a sound surface, then if El Fabiolo is not fluent and losing momentum at the business end, then it could perhaps cost him. But I was very happy with this as a reappearance. Willie wouldn't have had him particularly straight for a relatively straightforward task, and the ground was testing. So it was everything I wanted to see. The other one I wanted to mention was Jungle Boogie. He's raced once in each of the last 4 calendar years, winning the previous 3. Looked a smart prospect when trouncing the useful Deal Kerr in a beginner's chase over an extended 2.5. Another lengthy absence, switched to Henry, and given a considerate ride here. Dropped out the back, allowed to come home in his own time, beaten 14 3/4 lengths, receiving £10. Now he's rising 10. And given the way he's taken his races previously, we may not see him on a racecourse again. But if they can keep him in one piece, he's eligible for festival handicaps. As though he's only had 2 chase starts, he's not a novice. And it's worth remembering what former trainer William Mullins said at the start of last season. He was very bullish. He said he could be anything going into Cheltenham, but they didn't manage to get in there. So if he gets an entry for something like the Plate, he'd be of interest. Clearly depends on what mark the BHA handicapper will give him. But he's one for the notebook.
Yeah, ears pricked up a bit listening to that. So yeah, one for the notebook there from Matt, Jungle Boogie. We'll stick with you, Matt, just on the Cork novice hurdle over 3 miles here. And we've always touched on maybe the good horses tend to be kept to the 2.5 range. But I was quite impressed with Search for Glory after the last, the way he quickened up and won well.
Yeah, I was impressed with the winner here. Second season hurdler. Search for Glory's got the traditional profile for the Albert Bartlett. 6 of the first 12 winners were in their second or third season over hurdles. Race looks to be changing a bit. More classy types are aimed at it now. So being battle hardened, while still a big positive, is a lesser part of the overall requirement now. And Search for Glory ran it in it last season. But like Monty Star and Hidden Valley Lake, they'd had a hard race at Clonmel just before that. So I forgive them bombing out. He was a good 5 1/4 lengths third to Croke Park in the Monksfield before first-time cheek pieces here. Pretty commanding style that he won it in, given that the race only unfolded up the straight. Mahan's way was keen, so he may not have got home with his first try 3 miles under rules. But Solitary Man and What Path had fought out the finish of a listed race over course and distance, less attritional ground. That was last month. So the form's got a fairly solid feel to it. Solitary Man was conceding £3 and beating 3 lengths, but I thought the winner was value for a good bit more than that. I wouldn't be put off by the proximity of the 110 rated Sarah Bearer. These staying novice hurdles on deep ground, they often only get racing late on. Not uncommon for lower rated horses not to be beaten that far. Search for Glory's only run on officially soft or heavy so far. Breeding, he ought to act on a sound surface. If the headgear keeps working, he could keep progressing. And he's liable to be underestimated, being a second season novice. Punters get sucked into looking for a star at short prices when tackling the ultra competitive Albert Bartlett, despite the fact 8 of the last 10 winners have gone off at double figure prices. So, as we mentioned earlier, the case of Lecky Watson, he's defensively priced at the moment. It's 21.0, so you wouldn't be backing him now, but he's one to keep on side, I think. He looks progressive.
Okay, yeah, Don, your thoughts in agreement with Matt?
Yeah, like my Albert Bartlett list is getting longer and longer. I need to do some culling.
Which is not good. It's not good. That's December. Yeah. It's back to our Derby winner if you think you found the Albert Bartlett winner.
Exactly, yeah. I've got 4 Albert Bartlett winners. But I thought he ran well the last day against Croke Park, who's also on that list, by the way. A stable companion. But I thought Croke Park showed more kind of aptitude for the test that it was in the Moscow Flyer. That said, Search for Glory, like the 2.5 miles was probably too sharp from the last day because as Matt said, like all his form last year was over 3 miles. He ran in the Sefton Hurdle at Aintree, and to me, second season novice for especially like it's a positive anyway because you have all the schooling and all the practice that goes along with being a second season hurdler. But I think it's a positive for the Albert Bartlett in particular because it's normally a contest for which you need somebody who's going to stay the course basically. And Search for Glory has all that, and he showed pace as well. Like Solitary Man, I know he's run 10 times and it looks like he's fairly exposed, but he kept on improving. Like he was on an upward curve going into yesterday's race, and he ran well, and the two of them pulled nicely away of Sarah Vera. Agree with Matt and Man's way, probably didn't stay in What Path. I'm not sure that he ran his race. He made 1 or 2 little niggly mistakes on the way around, and he led as well. So he was there to be shot at. But Search for Glory, possibly the cheek pieces have helped him because first time Gordon fitted cheek pieces, and it was probably career best performance. And it's only his 7th run, so he's got a really good mix of kind of proven ability, experience, and also he can still continue his progression, especially over these same trips. So yeah, I thought there was a lot to like about that. Okay,
Don, before we go, so you mentioned Croke Park, Search for Glory. Who are the other couple Albert Bartlett lists on the short list, which is becoming a long list?
Captain Teague, and going back to what Matt said earlier on, maybe on Tubber or whatever Henry de Bromhead runs.
Okay, fascinating stuff. We'll keep an eye on that. Our eye catchers section, and Matt, really like your first eye catcher here, so I'd love to steal your thunder, but I'll let you take it away. In Indiana Dreams, it was hard not to be impressed, to be fair.
No, go on, tell us, what did you think of him?
I think a serious chance in the Turners, and definitely overpriced in certain places post race. Maybe not anymore.
Yeah, the Shrewdies have been nibbling up those big prices. Yeah, another strong Irish beginners chase at Navan. Extended 2.5. I thought he was very impressive. 3 from 3 now in his career. Trounced a good horse in San Felicien by 13 lengths, albeit one that does jump significantly to his left at the business end. You wouldn't want to take bare form this literally, but it was 3 3/4 lengths further than Facile Vega beat San Felicien, and you'd think this intermediate trip would have suited San Felicien better. Race did fall apart a little bit. Hidden Valley Lake came down 3 out, always looking as if he was going a stride faster than he'd like. He'll be seen to better effect up in distance, and Shambally Kid didn't jump very well, but visually very taking, cruised into the race, and given how when in command of it, he steadied in the last, the way he picked up again up the stiff Navan Hill was impressive. His 2 runs for Willie have come over intermediate trips on testing ground. At this stage, I wouldn't want to guess what his trip is, nor whether he'd be as effective on a sound surface. So 19.0 now for the Turners, 21.0 for the Broadway. He's not an Ante-Post proposition for me, but he's very exciting if he stays sound. Second one is from the Winter Novice Hurdle at Sandown. That used to produce stars. Seymour Business, English Drever, Neptune Collonge, and Barton, who followed up in the Ballymore. It's been a weak grade 2 in recent years, but on paper, this looked the best renewal for a while. On the background, it's a real slog, so plenty of these might be better judged after the next run. My eye catcher was Insurrection. Jumped and travelled like the best horse, just got outstayed by Deafening Silence. Perhaps Insurrection's a 2-miler, at least on ground this testing, in which case you could forgive him this. He could have just simply been a non-stayer. He brushed aside a well-regarded Tizard horse at Exeter over an extended 2 miles the previous time. So he's one that's definitely judged after another run. He's 51.0 for the Ballymore. I wouldn't be writing him off as a grade 1 prospect yet. Simonson got outstayed in the winter before winning the Ballymore. My final eye catcher, Kintara. 3 seasons ago, he went into a lot of notebooks when bolting up by 17 lengths in a heavy ground bumper at Warwick from a couple of horses who turned into 115, 120 rated hurdlers. Didn't take hurdles the following season. Ran only twice last season when some of Kim Bailey's horses weren't firing. Switched to Mel Rowley, bolted up off 113 at Lingfield, and then on really heavy ground on Saturday, followed up over an extended 3 miles at Aintree off 118. It's a decent jumper when on a good stride, but still inclined to put in an extra stride, really lose momentum when he isn't. His Lingfield win came on good to soft, but I think genuinely testing ground is where he'll be seen to best effect. Slows the others down, gives him time with his obstacles, and he seems to be a relentless galloper. So though he'll go up from 118, he's not going to be on a stiff mark based on the promise of his bumper win. And I'd be hopeful he'll be a backable price next time he gets his conditions coming from unfashionable connections.
Okay, Matt's 3 eye catchers: King Tara, Insurrection, and Indiana Dreams. And Don, I nearly have an opinion on all 3 of these horses. I think I've nearly backed all 3 throughout the years. Take it away with Mascata, because I was with you in Leopardstown. Backed into 4.5 favourite. Didn't deliver, and then went and won the Grand Annual at 23.0. So it's yeah, I feel I missed out on that horse. So tell me why there's an opportunity to get on side with Mascata again later on in the season.
Keeping the faith, it's the ruination of many a good punter. Yeah, I like her as a mare. I thought she was very good when she won the Tim Duggan Chase at Limerick last Christmas, and obviously in the Grand Annual she was brilliant. She got her fast-paced soft ground 2 miles that seemed to suit her well. She was disappointing at Clonmel, no question. And look, I just put that down to first run of the year, and one of those things, I think you can always allow a horse to poor run even if no explanation comes around. And I thought in the Hillyway Chase she ran really well over a trip, or in a obviously a high class contest against El Fabiolo, and kind of watching it live, it looked like Phil Dore was the one to put it up to El Fabiolo. Mascata led early on, she faded out of it, and I'd kind of forgotten about her. You were concentrating on the race between Phil Dore and El Fabiolo and thinking El Fabiolo has done that well and beaten a good horse in Phil Dore by not, by far enough. And next, suddenly Mascata's right there. Like, she was only beaten 3 lengths for second place. She stayed on really well. So I was kind of thinking that either step back up and trip, because the Tim Duggan Chase is over nearly 2.5 miles on soft ground at Limerick, or a greater stamina test over the minimum trip, maybe where she can get a lead, or softer ground maybe, although it was pretty soft at Cork, or a stiffer track, but something that's going to make it a stiffer test than the test that she had at Cork, maybe a faster pace. So I still think she's a mare who we shouldn't be writing off, for all that Matt has a stat I know about Grand Annual winners, which nearly made me relegate her to the subs bench, but she stayed on, slung on there corner forward. It's a poor Grand Annual winners. Obviously, I don't know, Matt, if you want to fill us in on this.
Yeah. Bring that trend in, Matt, and then you can fire ahead, Dom, with your other 2.
Yeah, since Andreas won the Grand Annual in 2007, the subsequent 16 winners are 0 from 70 over fences the following season. And in handicap chases, since Edward Ombleur won in 1998, all the Grand Annual winners since then are 0 from 60 in handicap chases the next season. It's not a trend I can really explain, so maybe there's a lot of statistical noise there, but it's amazing how it's turned into a real day in the sun race.
Yeah, like I suspect, like my thinking on the substance behind it is that they're between two stools, Grand Annual winners, because they get a fair hike for winning a handicap, and maybe they're just not good enough to be graded contenders. That said, Grand Annual winners have gone on and won the Red Rum Chase while they haven't won the following season.
Yeah.
And maybe with Moscata, she's a mare, so she'll be able to compete in mares graded races, which I think that might be able to help her. So we'll go for this one to go against the stats.
Yeah, before you do your second one, Don, I think you said Jenny Mac was your reaction with the second stat.
Yeah, sure was. So second horse, Chapeau de Soleil, he won at Clonmel on Thursday. Now the ground at Clonmel on Thursday was horrendous. Driving down thinking it might not go ahead, but it went ahead. But he coped with it really well. Like he clocked a time that was, I think, 29 seconds faster than Kitsilano clocked in the handicap hurdle later in the day. Now it was an 0-95 handicap hurdle. But 29 seconds, I put the two races together. They just jumped a second last. They were like nearly 2 furlongs out whenever they were crossing the line. And when Chapeau de Soleil was crossing the line, they were nearly 2 furlongs out in the handicap hurdle. But he did it really well. I was a bit worried about him going into the race because he hung so badly to his left when he ran in a bumper at Ferryhouse on Hatton's Grace Hurdle weekend last year when he finished second behind Better Days Ahead. He was nearly unsteerable. Like Patrick Mullins did really well on him to get him around the home turn that day. He dropped back to fourth, then he switched to the near side and he stayed on really well to finish second. Then he ran in the Cheltenham bumper actually, and he didn't run badly. He stayed on. Again, he seemed to be inclining a bit to his left, but he stayed on to finish 10th in that. But on to Clonmel, Patrick Mullins kicked him out in front. He had no worries about him jumping left, and he didn't jump left. He made one mistake, I think the middle flight down the back, and he got the second last a little bit wrong. But apart from that, his jumping was very, very good. And importantly, it was straight. And chatting to Patrick Mullins afterwards, he said that at one point last season, he thought he was his champion bumper horse. So that's how highly regarded Chapeau de Soleil was. That was over 2 miles 3, so he's got the option to go out and trip as well. But I'd say wherever he goes now, it'll be worth following, and he could morph into one of Willie Mullins' better novice hurdlers this season. And then the third one.
Just before you come in, Don, I know Matt wants to have a word on that. Impressive performance at Clonmel on Thursday.
Yeah, I was really taken with him too, really fast jumping most of the time. What I wanted to come in on was a quick mention about how well last season's champion bumper runners are doing on their hurdling debuts. 17 of the 21 runners have run over hurdles so far, 12 have won. To put that in context, only 5 of the 20 runners from Facile Vega's champion bumper won a hurdle on their first attempt. 8 or 9 has been the norm when there's been close to a full field. So form's working out really well, perhaps better than could be expected given the lack of stardust amongst last season's bumper crop. And like Don, I was taken with Chapeau de Soleil.
Okay, yeah, Don, take it away with your final eye catcher.
So third one's a little bit and obviously, well, not a progressive horse as such, but maybe progressive over marathon trips. Certainly Red, who finished third in the London Gold Cup. I thought he did plenty wrong through the race. His jumping was just kind of, he was getting in tight to fences. He wasn't really giving himself a chance. There was no real rhythm to his performance, but he was only beaten 4.5 lengths in the end by Trucker's Lodge. He remarkably about certainly Red, he normally runs right-handed. In fact, he's only run left-handed once over fences, and he was brought down early in a race at Lingfield early in his chasing career. But he jumps to his left. Like all his best runs are at Kempton, Wincanton, Sandown, but he jumps to his left. So I think he could, like, naturally, maybe there's a reason why they run him right-handed, but you think that going left-handed, that might, and even I watched that race at Lingfield again this morning, over the first 3 fences, he was out to his left, even at a left-handed track. So you'd love to see him going left-handed. He stays this 3.5 mile trip well. He's only run a couple of times over. He ran in the Bet365 Gold Cup last season, actually. He didn't run badly in that. So 3.5 miles, he stays that well. So these extreme trips seem to be no problem to him. In fact, he was staying on well up the hill again at Sandown on Saturday. And I was thinking maybe, any of these extreme tests, like one of the Sussex National at Plumpton, or The Eider Chase maybe at Newcastle, one of those, as a real stamina kind of handicap, ideally at a left-handed track. Maybe you can see it will seem to better effect in a contest like that.
Okay, yeah, 3 fascinating. Chapoy, Desoy, certainly Red and Moscata for Donn in the eyecatcher section. Matt, go to you on Stay Away Faye. This is what I completely omitted, but this can be in our rest of the weekend section. Escher, Novice's Chase. I thought this was a really good race, and I think Stay Away Faye could be a little bit underrated, a bit like Don Poley in a Brown advisory down the line.
I hope he's a bit quicker. He's a hugely likeable individual. Yeah, jumps well. Every time he looks beaten, he pulls out more. Paul Nicholls said afterwards he hoped the other horse would challenge him a fair way out rather than have one go at him close home. Stay Away Faye is such a battler. The big question about him is whether he'll have the cruising speed for a Broadway, especially on a sound surface. He'll jump and stay, but he could get too far behind. And he is 6.0. So given how many Irish novices there are who look like they could run in the race, it looks such a deep division this year. I wouldn't be interested in that as a price. Paul said the Reynolds sounds the most likely option for his one remaining start before the festival. Hopefully that'll be a deep enough event. They'll go a gallop and we'll see what he does taking a lead in a truly run race. Giovinco, been the subject of rave reviews from the Lucinda Russell team. Probably pestered slightly more by the loose horse, though. I don't think it made that much difference. He was going best approaching the last, but been a bit keen. Still looks a bit green. Stephen Mulqueen looked to be having to organise him quite a bit during the race. He then wandered about a bit at the business end, and he was just outslogged by a more battle-hardened opponent. It'd be fascinating to see what impact this race will have on him. He may learn a lot from it. He's beaten a length and a quarter, getting £3, so it wouldn't be a huge surprise if he were capable of turning the form round come March. 17.0 for the Broadway looks about right in a deep division.
Yeah, Don, your thoughts on this? Again, really good. I thought it was a really good form, really good race.
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting race, Dan, because I agree with Matt. Giovinco, I thought, like watching the race live, I thought he was doing way too much through the race. I was surprised he was able to mount a challenge like he did, and look, Stay Away Faye out-battled him, but he must have expended lots of energy on the way around, doing more than Stephen McQueen wanted him to do. And look, that's only his third chase. Maybe a race that doesn't put such a premium on stamina would suit him better, or maybe just when he with this experience he'll learn to settle a wee bit better and in behind horses and maybe in a bigger field. The other horse I thought to take out of the race was the Changing Man. Like he was traveling really well. His jumping was superb, and he traveled better than anything. Look, he did that at Exeter as well. He traveled better than Stay Away Faye into the home straight, and ultimately got outstayed by Stay Away Faye. So, maybe it would have been the same result here. He unseated at I think it was the middle fence stand, the middle railway fence, or maybe the first railway fence on the second circuit. But he was traveling well. It would have been really interesting to see how he would have fared. But I wouldn't mind seeing him again in a kind of a race in which there's more of a premium on pace than on stamina. Maybe Kempton would suit him well if they were inclined to go that way. But I think he's unlucky that he's got a U in front of him now, because he's a good jumper and he's an accurate jumper in the main, and it's only a second chase. So look, he hasn't won a chase yet, so they can still go for beginners. But I think the Changing Man maybe even drop down a wee bit in trip because he travels so well. I think that he's one to keep in mind.
Okay, we will move on to when to pull the trigger section. Matt, take it away. You have one for us this week.
Yeah, looking at the Mayor's Hurdle, the interesting Ante-Post betting shape feels a changing of the guard season. Honeysuckle and Epatante retired. The question I want to answer before pulling the trigger in this race is, how good were last season's juveniles? Two of the first three in the betting are 4-year-olds, Lossiemouth and Gala Marceau. Context is that historically juveniles have found it tough in all age graded conditions hurdles the following season. Since Countrywide Flame won the 2012 Fighting Fifth, Triumph winners are 0 from 35 in all age graded conditions hurdles the following season. Only Catch It and Espoir de Laine have won the champion hurdles 5-year-olds since the 80s. No 5-year-olds ever won the Stayers Hurdle. 5-year-olds have a fair overall record in the Mayor's Hurdle, 3 from 27, but that includes the first two renewals when it was a much weaker race. In the last 14, only the brilliant Apples Jades won. She won an open grade 1 against the Geldings. The Hatton's Grace as a 4-year-old, just been chinned in another, the Fighting Fifth. There hasn't even been a 5-year-old that's contested any of the last 3 Mayor's Hurdles. Not easy to assess how good the juveniles are from the Triumph form. None of the main protagonists have run in all-age company over hurdles yet. Woolley trained the first 4 home. He said Lossiemouth and Gala Marceau are going to give you plenty of time to get over a busy juvenile campaign, potentially starting out over Christmas. Positive signs from the top handicaps about the 4-year-old crop. Zarek the Brave won the Galway Hurdle. Common Practice led by Your Side Home in the 100 grand handicap at Fairy House the other day, and both of them were well beaten by Lossiemouth last season. Whilst there's a much expanded programme of graded Mares Hurdle races now, it's been noticeable that few of the Mares Hurdle winners have actually been running in them. Only Vroom Vroom Mag, who won the Warfield, and Black Tears, who won the Quevega, have contested Mares only graded races during the season. In the post-Quevega era, 5 of the other 6 winners have been running in open pattern races against the geldings. Form often in defeat in those top races against the geldings, often underbetting the Mares Hurdle. So I don't have specific trials I want to see before pulling the trigger. I've seen Astro Diamond, the Hatton's Grace, Love Envoy and You Wear It Well in the Fighting Fifth, Echoes in Rain, the Morgiana, West Balboa, decent Class 2 conditions of Entered Aintree, Magical Zoe in the Grade 3 Intermediate at Down Royal. So there's already plenty of strong form against the geldings to judge the best older mares by. Hopefully I'll see the 2 Mullins 4-year-old mares in action over Christmas. Then I'll be ready to pull the trigger on a Mares Hurdle bet.
Okay, very interesting thoughts there from Matt. One to keep an eye, particularly over the busy Christmas period, maybe at Leopardstown perhaps. We have a question in on our YouTube channel, so do get your questions for Matt or Don. It's a question specifically for Matt. I have a question for Matt from Trevor Clark on YouTube. Have you a horse that you think is tailor-made for a Cheltenham handicap this year, and what race?
I'm constantly trying to answer just that question.
It's a nice easy one.
Yeah.
We've talked about a few horses who run that week and caught my eyes potentially interested with handicap. So rather than repeat any of those, I wanted to answer this with something different. Every season now, I try and spot who Gordon Elliott's horse is for the Kim Muir, usually a novice. 19 runners have been sent out from Culuntra House. 3 have won the Kim Muir, 6 have been placed. Of the novices, it's 2 wins and 3 places from 9 runners. And neither of those novice winners have run beyond an extended 2.5 over fences. Mount Ida have run twice out of the 3 races at the minimum trip. So 2 for your notebook, Trevor. They're the pair that went off joint favourites for the Martin Pipe last season, race that tends to throw up stayers. Firstly, Imagine, who like Mount Ida, has had his first 2 chase starts around 2 miles, scrambled home in a very weak Craddockstown last time at long odds on. Gordon's now going to step him up in trip. He was 5 lengths 5th in the Martin Pipe off 139. The horse he beat by half a length at levels in the Craddockstown's rated 140 over fences in Ireland. So Gordon's going to need some careful planning to get him in under the 145 ceiling. The average rise for Irish horses in the Festival Handicap chases last year being £4. The other's Cool Survivor, apparently stopped quickly in the Martin Pipe, having previously won a listed novice hurdle over 3 miles at Cork, looking a strong stayer. On his 2 chase starts so far, just chinned by Quilixios over 2-3 at Limerick, and then was one of the 10 runners never put in the beginners, won by Gaelic Warrior over the same trip at Punchestown. He ran off 140 in the Martin Pipe. Might be easier to get in under the 145 rating ceiling. He runs in the beginners over nearly 3 miles at Punchestown tomorrow, where we'll learn more. And unsurprisingly, Gordon's horses get backed for the Kim Muir, especially once it's announced Jamie Codd's riding, or if Gordon's got Derek O'Connor. And if you restrict the Culuntra House runners to those that went off 10.0 or shorter, then the results become 3 wins and 4 places from just 10 runners. The value tends to be Ante-Post. So I'll be keeping an eye on Gordon's potential team over the next few weeks. This early stage, both Imagine and Cool Survivor look tailor-made for the Kim Muir.
Great question, Trevor. Don, I don't want a horse specifically, but for you, just thinking of Cheltenham handicaps, are you already looking at horses? I know where your eye catchers you are, but is there certain handicaps you do really well in? Just a little bit of thoughts on Cheltenham handicaps this time of year. Obviously not betting, but just thinking about them.
Yeah, look, it's the Kim Muir. Like I fully agree with Matt. It's a race that you want a good amateur on your side. It's massive. Like if you look down through the list, they're all good amateurs who've won the race, and generally Gordon Elliott, Willie Mullins, they'll have good amateurs on their side, especially the selected ones from those yards. So no, that's interesting. The fact that it's an 145 handicap as well, it's quite a specific type of horse. And look, Matt's rationale there is brilliant. You know, you've got horses who, if the 2 who ran in the Martin Pipe, so they're running in handicaps, they're handicap oriented, and they've got Cheltenham Festival form as well. So that's all that all makes an awful lot of sense to me. But yeah, look, it's I suppose from a betting perspective, I'd rarely have a bet in a handicap until close enough to the race itself. Like at the moment, this time of year, I wouldn't even be thinking of handicaps that much. It's more about the graded races. But then once you turn the year and then start rolling into Cheltenham, rolling towards March, then the handicaps do come up, and you're looking for horses who are, you know, who have the handicaps or a handicap on the radar. So look, nothing specific at present, Darren, but no, I couldn't argue against the rationale that Matt's put up there.
Yeah, enjoyed that, Matt, to be fair. And my thanks to Matt and Don. As always, we'll be back next week. Same time, same place, but we'll be moving to the Tuesday slot again. But do get your questions in, and we will do our best to answer them in the time frame allowed. Until then, make sure you join Tom Stanley, obviously winning after his winning best bet. I think his last winning best bet was the King George Tornado Flyer 18 months ago, or nearly 2 years ago now, as I keep telling them. But hopefully the other lads will have a few winners for you, and we will chat to you next week on the Cheltenham Trail. Chat to you then. Bye-bye.